think we're up. Hello YouTube. I hope everyone is having a fine Thursday. It's beautiful out, and as you can see, it no longer requires 6 layers of clothing to be down here in the studio, which is nice. So I'm super happy about that. Today we've got Rot Not mastering session, and I wanted to start with a totally blank project and showcase a pretty cool mastering plugin that I find really helpful. So first we're gonna get the files in here, and we've got mix 1 and mix 1. There were no notes on these mixes, which was cool. I think we got them pretty nailed down right out of the gate. This project is headed up by a girl named Harmony from Lansing. She came to me with these songs and was like, hey, can you help me produce these? I said, yeah, sure. What do you need? So she's got the songs written. She's in the process of putting together a band and looking for members. So I ended up playing the rhythm section on these. So hopefully this is going to be something that she can take out in the world and say, hey, I got these, I got the parts written, got the songs written, they've got legs, who wants to be in my band? Let's get in the van and go. And that is the result that we're hoping for with these tracks. So I'm going to blow them up nice and big. You can see here, this is something I always talk about, dynamics. The way we recorded these, the way I mixed them, we retained all the dynamics, but they're still nice and loud. So we're gonna get in here and mastering. We're gonna squash them down a little bit further, and see what we can see. So without further ado, here's the first track. This one's called Melted Numb. Oh, and just kidding, that is Alkaline Trio, because this is the plugin I wanted to show you. Metric AB. So I've got a bunch of tracks down here. This is a reference program, and what it does is just gives you the ability to switch back and forth at will on the fly between what you're working on and a reference track. So I've got down here a bunch of songs that I really like, that I know really well, and these are just to compare loudness, tonality, are all the instruments living in the right frequency range that we're accustomed to hearing. Because in mastering, I don't want to say it's not a creative art, because it is, and you're definitely imparting your own sonic vision onto the song, and you're the last person to touch it before it goes out into the world and is released or pressed or whatever's going to happen to it. But when we're mastering, it's a little more empirical, it's a little more scientific. There's things that just have to be right, and we're talking about something that gets thrown around a lot in audio engineering circles is saying commercially competitive or industry standard. Any of these things, it's just what it boils down to is people are used to hearing stuff a certain way, and that is just inevitable. It's not you don't want to look at it like, oh, everything's, needs to be in this nice little box and all has to be the same. And it's not really like that. It's just that, everything needs to live in its proper home in the frequency spectrum. The loudness needs to be right. If it's going to Spotify, we want to send it out at -14 LUFS. If it's going to vinyl, maybe slightly quieter, but more importantly, less limiting on vinyl. This one's not going to vinyl, so we're just mastering for streaming today. So we'll be outputting at 4824. Most of the streaming services now are offering 4824 compatibility. I think it sounds better than CD standard, which is 4416. We'll get into that later. If anyone has any questions on formatting, please ask, because it's something I like to talk about. So anyway, here's Metric AB. Let's see, what's a good one for our first reference? Let's use, there we go, Rise Against State of the Union. This is a big, loud track. I think a lot of people probably know this one. Okay, so we got classic punk guitars. I mean, you hear it. Everybody knows this track. Come on. So we'll reference on that for starters. All right, so back to harmony. Here we go. Melted Numb. Seeing immediately, I think Rise Against was the right choice. The guitars are relatively similar, and I'm already pretty happy with how they're sitting. Okay, so right away, the big difference is I'm noticing Rise Against sounds a lot more compressed because that is a master track. The drums, I feel like the drums are a little more forward in the master track. So I think that's what we're going to try to achieve with this, with the compression, EQ, and limiting that we'll be doing here. Is bringing those drums out, kind of tucking the vocal down and in, because as you can hear, our vocal here with harmony is sitting right on top. We kind of want to just like duck it down into the mix so that it gels nice. And there's a variety of things we can do to make that happen. So first off, let's get a little compression going. I'm going to use the Shadow Hills because it's my favorite. This is the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor Class A from Brainworks. Brainworks Studios does a really great job. They're a member of Plugin Alliance. Dirk, the founder of both companies, real cool guy, very knowledgeable engineer. And so this is the Shadow Hills. It's an optical compressor up top and a discrete on the bottom. So we're going to use the optical first. And this compressor, a lot of times I find, and with a lot of compressors, I find that we want to do just almost nothing. Just if your gain reduction meter starts to move, you're probably doing enough. This compressor, I don't know what everybody's listening on today. If you're listening on good speakers, you'll be able to hear that just loading it up in the default position, it has a significant impact on the sound. So let's just go ahead and roll it, and I'll just A/B it on and off. That's in, out. Seeing right there, you saw the meter twitch. It's the gain reduction meter up there on the left-hand VE meter, and that is assigned to the optical compressor right now. So we're seeing what the optical's doing, but you could hear it. It started to change the sound quite a bit before it even moved, and once the needle twitched, to me that sounded like too much compression. So we're going to dial it back a skosh. And so this compressor, and in real life, for anyone that doesn't know, this is a real unit. This exists in a hardware format. This is a $9,000 mastering compressor in the hardware format. And of course, I've never used one because I don't have $9,000 to spare for a compressor. But all accounts are that this plugin keeps up with the hardware pretty close. So what this has down here in the middle, this is a selectable output transformer. And in the hardware version, there's actually 3 different output transformers, and they're selectable, and they're made of different metals because different metals impart a different flavor onto the sound. And the output transformer is, of course, like the final thing in the circuit. And I like to use the steel on heavy rock music. So we got nickel, iron, and steel. On like heavy rock, abrasive kind of stuff that needs to be, really low end heavy and low end controlled. I use the steel setting because I find that it just provides like a nice little bit of harmonic saturation down around like 50, 60, like where the kick drum lives, where a lot of your bass guitar lives. So really like that. And here, I'll flip through those just so you guys can hear it. Higher. Kind of more mid forward. Maybe a little higher. And one thing I should have done is this. Take that off for a second, and we're going to make sure these are sitting right. A little above maybe where I should have. There we go. So we're peaking right around -6 now. Let's go over to the other track, make sure it's the same. Yep, okay. Maybe a little hotter on that one, so I'll dock it by half a dB on the clip gain. And that's the other thing. A lot of these, especially when you get to the mastering stage, like we're talking about moves that like 1 dB or less. With 3 dBs or less, very common. If you have to do any more than that, something should have been readjusted in the mix. If you find yourself making a 6 dB boost on the EQ, that's not good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull up our old buddy FabFilter Pro Q3. Probably the most ubiquitous EQ plugin of our time. I love it. So does everyone else. If you don't have it, get it. It will change your life. More on that later. Sorry, this is relatively flat. We got a big old bump here. This is the low end of our snare. I like a big fat beefy snare. I like the snare to cut through the mix. I like it to keep up the kick drum. So what I'm noticing is we're missing a bit of sub. The lower end could be hotter. Nice little dip, but not too much of a dip. It doesn't sound hollow, but our mids are carved out. Our low mids, most of a lot of your vocal and guitar information lives right up here between like 800 and 2K. This is your meat and potatoes of a lot of what you're hearing. So we want that to be prominent. Down here, 200, 400, that's where the mud lives. We want to, we don't want to have too much of that. And in this mix, it looks like we don't, which is good, which means I did things right. Maybe we'll try 800. I'll solo it out. See, there's Mudland. And you hear that snare coming through. That's the fundamental frequency of the snare drum. Looks like it's, I think it was at like 220, which is pretty standard. That's where it lives. And right now with this, see the red headphones on, we're soloed. We're just hearing this frequency range that we're adjusting. There's our high end. All right, so we wanted to do a little boost right around 850. It's about 1.5 dB. Not so big. And then I want to juice the lows up, so we're gonna pull out something different because I love FabFilter, but for something like this, I like a Pultec. I'll use the Waves one today. Put it down at 60. Started bringing it up. Make sure my subwoofers engage down here on the board. Alright, so now the pull tech, what you want to do is you want to boost it until it's just like a little too much, and then you want to use your attenuation to bring it back down. And what this does, these are overlapping curves. So if you've got your boost curve, we've got it set to 60, right? So the attenuation curve is going to be just a little bit offset from that. And what it does is allows you to boost very heavily and then attenuate an adjacent frequency and cut out some of the harmonics that you don't want, while being able to boost it like a pretty significant amount. So let's dial in the attenuation now. Yeah, it sucks all the low end out. Okay, so that's already in pretty good shape. I feel like the vocals getting tucked into the mix has already been achieved, and you saw I went back and I changed my mind. I wanted a tiny bit more compression on the Shadow Hills, so we just dialed it up literally one notch. And now the meter's just barely twitching, sounding great. Low end is nice and in control now, but it's still full. And, you know, again, these are small moves. We're boosting 3, we're attenuating 3. It's there, you know, we're just a little bit north of that on the boost. So from here, now I feel like we're in good shape. I want to get a little brightness out of this. I'm going to bring in the AMAC. And you know what, real quick, I'm just going to make sure we have saved this project since we're starting to get into it. Rotna EP, mastering, and boom, there we go, we have saved it. Alright, AMAC 200. This EQ rips. It's very simple. It's basically a GML 8200, I believe. Another very fancy hardware unit. It's another one from Plugin Alliance. They've been partnering with AMAC. If anybody doesn't know, AMAC was a company that was owned. They were kind of on the rocks in, I believe, the 80s. And they were very lucky because Rupert Neve was very bored at that time, and he decided to jump on board and invest in AMAC and help them out, and then he went on to design a bunch of stuff for them. So there's some AMAC gear floating around out there that's really fantastic, that was designed by Rupert himself. Yeah. So here we go. Let's check this EQ out. I think we need to get a little more brightness happening, get some excitement going on in this mix. So. here's something that we should talk about. Mono Maker. We're going to go back to the Shadow Hills because it's first in the chain. I'm going to put the Mono Maker up at about 78, 80. Let's go 80. So that means all information under 80 hertz is going to be summed to mono. What that does is really solidifies your center image, and that being in rock music mainly kick, snare, vocals, and bass guitar. How I mix is I keep my guitars hard panned. I think it's just a really cool sound, especially when we're doing something like this where it's, for all intents and purposes, it's a 3-piece band, and we've doubled the guitar part. It's most of the time it's the same guitar part on both sides, and I find that you get a big full sound, no phasing, and just a really wide image and a really solid center when you go LCR with the guitars. So we've got hard panned guitars, and what we're gonna do is hit this with the Mono Maker, and I'm gonna turn it off, roll it, and I'll dial it up to 80. If you're listening on headphones, you will probably hear how the center image just gets a little bit more solid. So you can really hear how that just reinforces the bottom end. And it might be cleaning up some phase issues. I did do this in the mix on the 2-bus as well, so the difference here with the Mono Maker is not going to be quite as dramatic as what it was in the mix. I'll probably do another video on that later. So moving on, we have done a little bit of mild compression. We have done a tiny bit of boost in Fab Filter. We've done a medium amount of boost on the Pultec, not really because we attenuated most of it, and a little bit on the high end. So you'll notice I'm using each of these EQ plugins. I just loaded up 3 EQ plugins, all to do barely anything. It's because on this AMAC, I really like the way this thing does high end. It's nice and smooth, but it still has kind of a bite to it. Like it's bitey, but it's not harsh. If I want really, really smooth, I use the NIF Audio Soma, which is exactly the same type of EQ. It's a stereo parametric analog emulation, hardware based, in reality anyways. So, and that's a note about that. What these guys are doing now, these engineers, software engineers, it's crazy. They're taking these. Brainworks has a lab where they intake physical hardware and they take it apart and test it. And they crack it open, they test all the circuits, they hook up all kinds of crazy metering equipment, and they're now modeling these things down to the tolerances between different individual components of the same designation. So like if I have a 1000K or a 1K resistor in this, somewhere in this circuit. I'm sure there's a couple hundred of those in here. So they're taking these 1K resistors and say they were made in Japan. There's like a bunch of companies that make components. So say they're made in Japan by Panasonic or something, and they will take a bunch of these Panasonic resistors or caps or whatever they might be, and they'll test them, and they will get the discrepancies in the tolerances and see what those are, and then they're actually modeling that digitally, because that's the they're chasing the ghosts, they're chasing the magic that everybody says, oh, analog's warmer, it's just more 3-dimensional, it's this, it's that. These guys are actually pretty freaking close to nailing it. I still find some hardware is better than plugins. Probably always going to be the case. It's just going to be different. But these are really good. And because of that, I like to use different ones for different things. So Fab Filter does a good job all around. But I like the mid-range of Fab Filter. Fab Filter is just very colorless. It's straight up. It doesn't... And I don't want my mid-range altered because I like how the mid-range sounds. I like how I recorded it. I like how I mixed it. But I just wanted a little more. So when you just want more or less and you don't want coloration, you go to FabFilter. Like I said, the Pultec Puig Tech here, allegedly designed in conjunction with Jack Joseph Puig, who is a fantastic engineer. This thing does great on the low end. It's really smooth. It keeps it tight. It doesn't get flubby. It doesn't fart out. And AMEC, like I said, high frequency that is aggressive, but still smooth and not harsh. So that's why I'm loading up a ridiculous amount of plugins for not much work at all. Hope that is enlightening. And I'm talking a lot. I'm gonna need some iced tea. Okay, so now that we've got EQ and a mild amount of compression out of the way, now we can start it in on loudness. Loudness is a thing that a lot of people have opinions about. Everybody likes to talk about it. People like to argue about it. What we need to do here is make it loud enough for Spotify. I've been told many different things by many different people. I've done a lot of research on this. There was concern in the engineering community for a long time that Spotify was adding additional limiting and compression, similar to what FM radio stations used to do back in the day, because it was the loudness war really started with radio. If you're not familiar with the loudness war, go look it up. It's basically exactly what it sounds like, just the never-ending pursuit of a louder and louder mix. And at a certain point, it just gets crazy, and you start destroying the sound. And I'll show you. I'll destroy it, and we'll bring it back again and put it back to where it needs to be. We want to retain dynamics, but we need to be competitive. And where this all stems from was in the heyday of FM radio, you had disc jockeys, right? So DJs, they used to actually have a stack of discs and a turntable next to them, and they would pick them and put them on. And what you had was limitations in that format, because vinyl can only be mastered so loud, and especially the high frequency content in a vinyl master is super important, because especially back in the day, you could actually burn out the vinyl cutting lathe. When they do the initial cuts before the lacquers are made, if you're feeding it too much high frequency information, it will burn out. It will physically heat up and burn out and destroy, a $500,000 piece of equipment. So they found that out the hard way a few times, I'm sure. But it was basically just the war between, okay, Joe's band is on the radio and my band is on the radio, but man, when they play back to back, Joe's just sounds so much louder than mine. Why isn't my record louder? I want my record to be louder so people notice it. And and the DJs agreed, and they like to play the loudest stuff. So thus the loudness war began. And unfortunately, we're still dealing with the fallout of that today, because in the digital age, what it can lead to is just really terribly over compressed mixes, especially since we have the tools to do this. Like I have just with the tools I have up on here right now, I could totally over compress and destroy this mix. And everybody's got these tools. So with great power comes great responsibility, and we're going to try to exercise that today. That is my spiel on the loudest war. That being said, let's make this fucker loud. Because we need to be able to be competitive in streaming land. So what we're going to use is a soft clipper. This is a spectral clipper. It can go hard, it can go soft. And basically, difference between a clipper and a limiter is a compressor with an infinite ratio, or any ratio above 10:1. And or is it above 100:1? Don't quote me on this. Compressor with an insanely high ratio. So a clipper actually just chops the audio off. Like if we're looking at our waveform right here, a limiter will take this peak and make it lower, and also take this peak and make it higher. A clipper just chops this off. And that is good, because that way we can then feed it into another compressor or a limiter, and we're not triggering we're getting more headroom before we need to trigger the limiter. So we're not squashing these dynamics down here, and we're not blowing this part up and ruining the sonic quality of the mix, because that's the real danger. And like here, let's we can easily start destroying it, and then we'll bring it back. So you can already hear, holy crap, just at the default setting. Wow, I have to turn my monitors down. This plugin is unbelievable. Newfangled audio. Is I think, as Mixbus TV said, it is a lean, mean loudness machine. And this is what we got. It's really clear though, and that's what we're going for. Is I like to use tools that do not alter the clarity, do not alter the sonic textures of the mix, but we want to achieve this loudness. So I'm gonna back this off because even in the default setting, we're already getting kind of crazy here. So let's roll it. See, you can hear, I took it up to 6.3 on the drive. You can hear it's starting to pump and get weird. We're gonna back that off. And I think maybe right around the default setting, honestly, was pretty good. So this achieved two things. One, it brought the drums up to where I want them. Two, it has added just ever so slight movement. Like when it gets crazy, we call it pumping, which is, unless you're doing dance music, EDM, that kind of thing, usually quite undesirable. But it has added just a little excitement and movement to the mix, and that's another thing. Back to Jack Joseph Puig, actually, who helped design this plugin. He is a huge proponent of setting your attack and release times on compressors and limiters to match the tempo of the song. I think that is tremendously important. Something that you have to do. You have to mix a lot and do a lot of compression and like really play with it to start understanding the value of it, I think. And it's not necessarily for every track. Sometimes you just want smooth across the board compression. But when we're trying to bring the most excitement out of a track, we can sort of make it more exciting and give kind of the illusion of more movement by employing compression like this. So let's find another compressor to do that with. And this is called compression staging. You're seeing what I'm doing here. It's just ever so slight increments of compression. So let's see. What do we want to use to do this? I'm thinking, let's go to Kush. Novatron. Pusher. Not Pusher, that's too much. Let's go with the Novatron. This is a sweet plugin. Okay. So, and again, we're not going to do very much here. We're going to go slow attack, fast release, because it's a fast song. So we want that needle to kind of do this. You know, life is fleeting, melted. No, we want to see this. You want the gain reduction meter. You want it to dance to the song. That's how I think of it. So let's do it. So I just took it from the limit setting to the mix setting. So obviously this is mix, punish, and limit. So limit's going to be brick wall. Punish is going to be a heavy ratio. Mix is going to be a little softer. And this compressor is interesting. It's a bunch of different compressors in one. It's really hard to read. Kush is very adamant that you should use your ears, not your eyes. But this is a VCA, a FET over here, and a Mu as far as speeds go. So I've got this on the FET setting. That's basically as fast as it can go on the release, 15 milliseconds. Over here, we are up at 12 milliseconds on the attack. And we're right here. You can hear there's like this sweet spot here where it gets louder right around here, and then right around here it gets to be squashed. And I'm even going to dial it back just a skosh. We're looking at about 1 dB of gain reduction on the meter. It's dancing how I want. It's in tempo with the song. Again, tremendously important. Ask Jack Joseph Puig. He's the man. So doing a little saturation. That's just the default setting. I'm going to leave it alone. I like it. It's adding a little bit. So now we've got some excitement going on in the compression. Let's just roll the song, listen to it, kind of take a refresh. Let's go back to Rise Against and see how we're doing. let's go back and let's listen to Rise Against. So I gotta be honest, I think the mix I'm working on here is louder and clearer than State of the Union. Um, and that's good. That's where I want to be. Granted, it's a 20 something year old recording at this point, so kind of apples and oranges. They were not working with the same kind of tools that we are today. So, but that being said, it's a gold standard song. The guitar tone's great, and I think it's just a very balanced track, so I like to use it as a reference when I'm doing punk rock. So now let's get into our metering and see what we're looking like for dynamics, loudness, stereo image, all this. Once again, metric AB by Adapter, absolutely game-changing mastering plugin. And I have this on my monitor chain, in case anyone's wondering. You also see VSX here. I don't think I'm going to use that today, but I do use Slate VSX, another really cool tool, especially if you're, in a not acoustically treated environment. This is treated, and I'm very in tune without sound, so we're not going to be using the headphones too much today for mastering. But let's just get in and see what we've done. Oh, and just so everyone knows, the blue up here is Melted Numb by Rotnot, and the orange down here is going to be Rise Against. So we're comparing, and this is the beauty of this plugin, we're directly comparing the frequency spectrums while listening to one or the other. And that'll be true on everything. So orange is our reference, blue is what we're working on. And as you can see, they are extremely similar, which means I'm doing my job right. And that's good, because it means my ears aren't lying to me. Alright, so this is a phase correlation meter. The line in the middle is I believe it is the RMS value of your phase correlation, which is root mean square. Basically, it's the average. The average of your phase correlation. 0 is the middle. -1 is 180 degrees out of phase. And that's why it's red down here. So what you'll see is that, and this is the analog noise being generated, or the analog noise. This is the analog noise being generated by the analog emulation plugins. It is not, as you can see, it is not audible, but it does exist, so the meter will pick it up. So what you'll see is the sky blue line is sitting nicely right here in the middle. You want peak, like prime time correlation, like good correlation, is right here between 0 and 1. And you can see that when the guitars drop out, it moves a little bit more in phase. So I would assume that that's the distortion on the bass intruding on the guitar space a little bit, which you're gonna have that in this kind of music. but it's not dipping into the red. It's not going below 0, so it's in phase enough that we're not having crazy phase issues in the upper mid-range, which is great because that's how you get a hollow sounding mix, is if you have that. So let's look at our stereo image. Love it. Pretty balanced. Going from side to side. Got movement. It's a little heavy to the right. Rising against it's a little heavy to the left. I don't find it to be unbalanced. It doesn't sound unbalanced. Let's look at our dynamics. All right, so this is where I would expect to be at. You'll see Rise Against is floating between loud. It did say squashed for a second. This was a 2000s era master. This was kind of the height of the loudest war. They were squashing stuff back then. And you'll see Rotnot here is at competitive, which is great. We're at 11. So that's fantastic because we haven't done any limiting at all yet. So now I think we're ready for final limiting. Let's get this going. I'm going to use, first I'm going to save, I'm going to use Brainworks XLV2. This is a badass limiter. This is a multi-band limiter, and it has this XL function, which, to be completely honest with everyone, I'm not sure exactly what's under the hood of this. It is some kind of mid-side, and this is a mid-side bass plugin. It's some kind of mid-side saturation, harmonic generation that's going on with this XL. It is highly useful. It's just a make it better knob to a point. It can also destroy stuff, but as can everything. So we're gonna roll it and see what we got. can see, I've got the 1 second. So you can see I adjusted the attack and release time on the mid-high, which is like, again, that's like the body of the mix. That's where everything lives. So adjusted the mid-high. I got the attack and release set slow and fast. I think I probably dialed this back up a little bit, but that's going to preserve the transients in the upper mid-range, which is where most of the transients are. So we don't want to squash the transients. We don't want to kill them. We want them to be nice. But we do want to contain them, and we do want to make it loud. So, again, we're doing very little. Very little. These meters up here, this is showing you how much gain reduction is being done. It's not much. So, because of that, we are going to be able to stick the other limiter on here to just finally, well, actually, you know what we're going to do. First, do our final gluing with the Kive Audio tape face. This thing is awesome, but kind of finicky. I'm going to roll it, and you're going to see it's going to be super distorted. No, that just ruined our mix, didn't it? Gross. Don't want that. So we're going to set it to type 2. I'm just going to roll this while I change it so you can hear the different settings. So now you can see we are into screaming loud territory, but we've retained the dynamics. We've retained the dynamics that we're getting similar numbers to Rise Against, but it is perceived louder because there's more dynamics. They're retained. The transients are not squashed, and the recordings were done with very low noise. and everything was filtered appropriately so that everything's living in its own place where it should, and the result is that you get a super loud, super clear master. And I think I'm even going to back off the final limiter just ever so slightly. All right, well, that's about it. It's loud, it's clear, the EQ is right, you can hear all the instruments, you can hear the drums, you can hear the vocals are sitting nice on top, but they're not totally blaring in your face, distracting from the rest of the mix. So overall, I'm really happy with this. I think it's very balanced. It didn't take too long to get it there, and yeah, so hopefully we've got another happy client, and hopefully this recording goes on to make some waves in the scene where it comes from, and we'll be doing more. So if you tuned in, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.